One of the most baffling aspects of being an anime fan is the distinction of being an anime fan, and what exactly that entails. It almost seems like there should be an asterisk next to the statement, "I am an anime fan," which would read, "I am a fan of a number of Japanese animated shows that have little, if any, correlation with each other in terms of tone, character, writing, and continuity." It's the same thing with being a comic book fan. Just because you like comic books doesn't mean you like all comic books, and the comic books you do like may vary wildly from one another. But the difference between these fandoms is that comic books leave little room for debate over what they are. They are printed pages of sequential art that tell a story. There might be some stylistic differences and differences in which they are read, but the medium is the same. Anime, on the other hand, is tougher to define. The simplistic definition of animation from Japan seems to do alright, but then you wonder about the shows that have had animation done in Japan by real Japanese animation studios, but the popular consensus doesn't deem them anime. So maybe anime is just animation that was originally thought of in Japan. But that definition doesn't quite work either. The Mysterious Cities of Gold is considered anime, even though it was written and directed by two Frenchmen. Not to mention, it was based off an American novel, The King's Fifth. In fact, there's been a ton of anime that are from decidedly non-Japanese sources. You can't tell me that Dracula, Sovereign of the Damned isn't anime. Or Frankenstein, for that matter. Yeah, that exists. So, is anime only defined by its visual style and design? Well, that would be a very loose definition, since anime can vary wildly, as we already established. There's a world of difference between Jinro and Sailor Moon. And what about all the non-Japanese shows that have adopted the quote-unquote anime style? These aren't considered anime, even though they fit the visual criteria, simply because of their non-Japanese sources. What about computer-generated animation? I've never heard anyone call Advent Children anime without attempting to qualify it, as if the very nature of computer animation somehow makes it not animation. It's a complicated issue, and the only answer that I can give is my own viewpoint on the subject. Anime is just like pornography. I know it when I see it. So for the next month, I'm going to be looking at a few titles that aren't considered anime, and probably aren't, but nonetheless muddy the waters. And before you even ask, no, we are not going to cover Avatar: The Last Airbender or its sequel, Legend of Korra. But I do want to start off this conversation by dovetailing off of Korra. I came across an article on Forbes asking the question, had Legend of Korra invented a new type of television genre, the animated drama? It's a silly question, of course, since the animated drama has existed in Japan for over 30 years before Korra came along, but let's say he meant as far as American television is concerned. The article brings up shows like Gargoyles and Batman the Animated Series, but it downplays their contributions and even has the gall to compare Korra to Breaking Bad of all shows. Saying that Legend of Korra invented the animated drama would be to kick Bruce Timm in the balls, fuck Alan Burnett's dog, and pimp Paul Dini's mom. Cheap. I'm not trying to say that Legend of Korra is a bad show or anything like that, but trying to make the argument that it started the animated drama is just downright wrong. Especially when you consider that Spawn the Animated Series came out 15 years prior. Hell, at least it has more to do with Breaking Bad than Korra does. Spawn, the animated series, had an 18-episode run on HBO back in 1997, and it's definitely as dark and dramatic as this trash article portends Korra is. Animated by none other than Madhouse, it also happens to throw a wrench into the conventional definition of anime. I don't want to go into too many details about the comic book it was based off of, since I'm not too familiar with the comic, but I will say that as a kid in the late 90s, Spawn was inescapable. The film, the action figures, the games, they just surrounded me, and even though I was too young to read the stories or watch the shitty movie at the time, Spawn can't help but be a nostalgic curiosity for me. As for the series, well, let's just say it was this close to being really good television. To start everyone off on the same page, Spawn is about the damned spirit of Al Simmons, a former special operative who made a pact with Hell to let him see his wife again, but in return become a minion of Hell in their battle against Heaven. Having returned from the dead, killed at the hands of a treacherous comrade, his memories are fragmented, with only the image of his wife Wanda to remind him of what he lost.
How did this happen to me? You made a deal, you stupid son of a bitch. You made a deal with Malbolgia. You cut a deal for your soul.
This was made during a time when HBO started to pull itself out of the mire of trash television. Sure, we know it today is the premier network where only the best written television makes the grade, and Arliss, but in the mid-90s, HBO was basically nothing but uncut movies, taxicab confessions, and softcore pornography disguised as 60-minute style exposés. But somewhere in 96 to 97, HBO started showing some pretty bold television, and along with the likes of Mr. Show, which is arguably the greatest sketch comedy program of the last 30 years, and Oz, HBO put out probably the one of two possible American animated dramas for mature audiences. Okay, mature being a loose term here. I'll admit the only reason why I first watched the show back around 10 years or so ago was because I heard it had boobs in it. Now, at the time, I knew that certain Japanese cartoons had breasts in it, but never before had I believed that there were American cartoon tits. This, of course, being before I heard about heavy metal, and the less said about that POS the better. Nevertheless, I watched the show from the worst mindset one can have, so it's no wonder that I initially thought of it as confusing. I still think it's confusing, don't get me wrong, but the series is more interesting than my first appraisal gave it credit for. There were 18 episodes spread over 3 seasons of the show, and by far and away the first season was the best, with story speaking in mind. Overall, the season was properly bookended by a complete and satisfying character arc for Spawn. He learns of his fate, tries to find meaning in his situation, and does. Throw in some memorable antagonists, some genuinely creepy atmosphere and moments, and you have 6 great episodes of the show. Not to say that the first season was perfect or anything, the animation during the albeit few daylight scenes was pretty spotty, and of course, we all remember this technical goof.
Let me guess. The first day on the pro bono case.
Is it that obvious?
It's the only time you get frazzled.
The first season also had more than its share of awkward moments and characters. Like this guy.
How'd you come back from that?
The rumors you've heard about me are all true.
But you got no conscience. No soul when it comes to killing.
What I've got is a hungry bank account. And right now, someone's paying me top dollar on your behalf. So, what seems to be the problem?
You, keep up with current events?
Only where death is concerned.
Overkill here is really the weirdest turn in the entire show, and when he's sent after Spawn by the mob after he killed a lot of hitmen, he's killed off as quickly as he came.
Knock, knock.
His presence alone causes the show to come to a screeching halt, a gigantic cyborg assassin who just exists. Sure, this is a world where demons and angelic warriors fight their war over human souls, but at least that lends itself to the background mythology of the show. This guy just comes out of nowhere, and we never see another cyborg again.
Bring me his bones in one bag and his organs in another, okay?
Of course. But I'll be keeping the heart for myself.
For what?
Dinner.
Another Odd Duck character is actually one of the major supporting characters of the show, a former Hellspawn and the current Spawn's moral mentor, Cagliostro.
400 years have passed. Once again, it is time for a new warrior to emerge from the darkness.
He also narrates the show from beginning to end, which is weird because the show has a scene where Cagliostro narrates on screen, looking over Spawn, but he doesn't address the audience.
New warriors often find allies among those damned by society. For a while, it gives them a sense of security. But they couldn't be more wrong.
I get that maybe this was supposed to be some kind of meta-narrative ploy, but when you have your narrator be an in-universe character that interacts with the other characters, make sure he's addressing the audience when he's slipping back into narration mode. Otherwise, he's going to look like a goddamn crazy person. It'd be like if in Twilight Zone, Rod Serling didn't look at the camera while he was giving his summation. Lastly, I want to address another elephant in the room when it comes to the first 6 episodes, and it's the out-of-place cameo of Angela, a celestial hunter that is ready and primed to kill Spawn, but is quickly shot down and never heard from again.
How long are you going to have it in for me, Gabby? A century? 2?
Follow appropriate protocol, and maybe I'll reconsider.
Just try and keep me out of this, Gabby.
Goodbye, Angela.
Wow. I love this. The only reason why Angela doesn't go after Spawn is because of bureaucracy and petty office politics. You could completely cut this scene and you would miss absolutely nothing from the series. Plus, every time a Spawn DVD is sold, Todd McFarlane here wouldn't have to give Neil Gaiman the time of day, let alone his royalties. Oh yeah, there's an entire backstory to that statement, but there isn't enough time here in this video. Especially not after I just remembered that Todd McFarlane himself introduces every single episode. God bless Todd, he's trying his best, but he comes off like the third understudy of the lead in an elementary school play.
Are you sure you know the difference between good and evil? As you race around trying to put food on the table, or pass your exams, or make love, are you confident that you could distinguish the forces of light from the forces of evil?
I'm not sure if he wrote these intros or not, but these are just tacky. It's like he just thumbed beyond good and evil and is trying to blow your mind. It's even worse in the later seasons when he just dicks around what has to be the old Tales from the Crypt set and barely gives any kind of intro at all.
When the lights are on, it seems that the darkness is held at bay, is sitting there at the edge of the light. But evil, it exists because we create it, but not out there. It comes from the inside.
Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. I call this story The Tale of the Lonely Ghost.
Needless to say, he's no Alfred Hitchcock, but I'm getting distracted. I did say that the first season was its best, and despite its flaws, I meant it. The episode progression and writing were never as good as the first season, and it was in this season that 3 characters really stood out and made the series. Sam and Twitch, and the Violator.
Oh, I hate early morning. Nothing human up at this hour.
No, sir. Just us civil servants.
To me, these 2 characters, police detectives who are among the very few clean cops in the city, give the series a personality beyond the grim veil that the story paints. Their back and forth is just a joy to observe and really shows off how witty the script can be. Sam here is a brash, hard-nosed cop, eager to fill his gut with coffee and donuts, and Twitch is the soft-spoken badass that puts up with Sam because he knows he means well.
Let's just see now. Lucky son of a bitch.
You know who's voicing Twitch here? Mike McShane. You know, the guy from Brotherly Love. Tom and Huck. Richie Rich. Okay, this guy. Yeah, it's true. This actor has a name. And it's not the psychiatrist from Office Space guy. And I guess I can't talk about voice acting in Spawn without mentioning Keith David as the eponymous Spawn, but honestly, I think his talents are a bit wasted here. His bellowing voice fits when Spawn is brooding and in anguish, but his performance suffers from the fact that for much of the series, his character is pretty one-note. Plus, when you think of Keith David, you think of his rich and soothing bass of a voice, not his gravelly bellows. I swear, every time I hear him talk about Wanda, it sounds like he's channeling Two-Face.
Wanda. Grace.
And all three are just channeling Dr. Claw at that point. But getting us back on track here, the third character, the Violator... I can't believe I just made that reference. He's tasked as Spawn's caretaker and guide to being a minion of hell. He is hateful, disgusting, and a wonderful villain. He's certainly more interesting than the alleged main antagonist, Jason Wynn, Al's former director, and the reason why he was killed. Which is never really explained. He just basically sits in the shadows and tries to pull political strings, which is menacing in its own right, don't get me wrong, but he too feels one note, like a 2-bit Xanatos. The Violator, on the other hand, is certainly more menacing and is more active in driving the plot. Well, at least in the first season. In the second and third seasons, the show downplayed his presence, and I think the show suffered for it. But I can understand not wanting to retread the same ground of having the Violator taunt Spawn over his remarried wife and the daughter she now has with him. A child, by the way, Al couldn't give her. Still, the scenes where the Violator just works his way into Al's psyche and pushes him to be the violent monster he was always meant to be is some of the most compelling moments of the show.
That's it, Spawn. Let yourself go. Get pissed. Do some damage. Don't take shit from nobody. And oh yeah, the big boy downstairs. 'Cause this is the way the world ends. Not with a bang. Both a lot of blood and torn flesh and broken bones. And I just love it.
Not to mention his demonic form can make anyone shit their drawers.
Consider this a friendly reminder. Get with the fucking program. You, Spawn, have never been worthy. I'll be back for you, baby. And when I come, you better be ready to rock and roll.
It was also in the first season that a lot of the more fruitful seeds were sown into the story, even if some of them wound up disappointing. This leads me to Chapel. Oh God! Chapel. As I understand it, Chapel here was originally a Rob Liefeld character in Youngblood, which normally means I would get Linkara to do the dirty business of actually explaining this, but his response was... not promising. I'm not even going to attempt to explain Chapel's backstory in the comics since it's not brought up much in the show. Besides, from what little I read, we're dealing with shit like gender flipping and there being somehow 2 Chapels and one just happens to be a horseman of the apocalypse and... oh God. It hurts. Chapel in the show started off on quite a note as an underling of Jason Wynn.
When's the hop? Tomorrow morning. Usual pickup and delivery. What? I don't like a lot of downtime, you know that. So get a hobby.
He seems your cliche thug, but he's tortured by memories of having to betray his friend and Al. One of the more memorable scenes of the entire show is his complete breakdown during meaningless sex.
No, Al. No. Hey, Chapel. We're partners, right?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
This is rich stuff here. A mercenary, haunted by his own betrayal, is forced once again to face the man he killed. And then Season 2 happened.
Who gave the order? Who was it?
It was Wynn. He gave me the order, but I wanted to do it.
Well, there goes any sense of pathos out the window. Way to go, show. Yup, Chapel just about-faced and shat on any chance of him being a sympathetic villain. I do like how Spawn winds up letting him live and Chapel is driven mad by the fact that Al is somehow still alive, but why do they have to undermine Chapel's character in the process? And this is indicative of the last 2 seasons. A lot promised, and not a lot delivered. The first season was encapsulated wonderfully, and it stands on its own quite well. Seasons 2 and 3 is where the show begins to go off the rails in terms of overarching story. Season 2 introduced us to a new character, Jade, but we don't know what's up with her until the middle of Season 3, and it just winds up being a veritable thud of an ending. Not to mention that her story is one of many disappointing plot threads, half of which get no resolution. The lead-ins to a Season 4 that never happened. And they all happen at relatively the same time. Sam and Twitch have to deal with a corrupt police chief, Jason Wynn becomes aware of hell, Spawn impregnates Wanda, and this child-to-be is prophesied to be the decider in the war between heaven and earth, and just, for the love of God, show, pick a plot thread and stick with it! Seasons 2 and 3 are a really mixed bag of quality. There are some episodes that are spot-on good television, but in service to the season, they're either extraneous, or they just aren't good enough to make up for the other episodes. If I had to characterize the entire show with one word, it would be overambitious. It's obvious that they wanted to do something that no one else was doing, and there is a feeling that each episode was made with all due passion. The show at times looked downright beautiful, and the voice acting was equally top-notch.
Don't let him kill my baby, please, man. I already done lost my husband and my little girl. My poor Kylie here is all I got left. Kyle, look at me. Did you hurt any of those children?
I don't hurt nobody.
I suppose, in a way, being overambitious is an admirable problem to have, but a problem nonetheless. Still, on the whole, I'm glad the show exists, if only to prove that American animation on television doesn't need to revolve around dick and fart jokes. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't great, but it was good.
This is the farewell bash for humanity, and you're bringing the party favors. Oh, in a word to the wise, laying there all twisted up like that, it's no good for your back.
Still, Spawn wasn't the only 90s comic book character that got its own adult animated adaptation. There were others. Despite your insistence to forget they happened. Till next time.